The first thing I noticed about the Veth-kaal, 3 years before any of this happened, was that it watched me back. Most of the research staff at Station Harrath called it Unit 7. The official designation was Specimen V1, which told you everything about how the xenobiology team thought of it. A data point sealed in 40 meters of pressurized brine, too large to move, too dangerous to approach, catalogued and forgotten. They'd pulled it from the Harrath Trench 11 years ago, sedated with enough tranquilizer to drop a frigate's engine crew, and poured it into Containment Bay 7 while it was still unconscious. No one had gone in since. The official protocol was observation only. The unofficial protocol was don't look at it too long. My job was maintenance. I cleaned the intake filters, checked the salinity calibrators, replaced the bioluminescence monitors when the Veth-kaal's light pulses burned them out, which happened every few weeks, because nothing built for standard Predator-class specimens was rated for what lived in Bay 7. I was 52 years old, civilian contract, the only human on station who didn't hold a research grade. The science staff called me Morrow when they bothered. Most of them didn't bother. I started humming because the work was quiet and the bay was dark and you needed something to push against the sound of all that water. Old songs mostly, things my mother used to sing. The Veth-kaal was a shape in the deep on my first shift, 200 meters of armored hide and 6 folded limbs, bioluminescent nodes cold and dim, hanging in the water column like a drowned city. I didn't think it could hear me. I didn't think it was paying attention. On my fourth shift it rose 10 meters. Not fast. Nothing about the Veth-kaal was fast until it chose to be. Just a slow vertical drift, the nodes warming from cold blue to a faint amber, and then it stopped and hung there in the water while I replaced a calibrator housing and hummed something I couldn't have named. I noted it in my maintenance log as anomalous buoyancy behavior and didn't tell anyone because no one would have cared. By the end of the first month, it surfaced when I came in. Not for the researchers, not for Dr. Rael Morrow, who ran the xenobiology team and had published 40 papers on Veth-kaal behavioral dormancy. Not for the station commander, who visited Bay 7 twice a year for inspection photos. For me. I'd come through the access hatch with my tool kit and my coffee, and the water would start moving, those 6 limbs unfolding slowly from whatever they'd been doing in the dark, and the whole massive shape would rise toward the observation rail like something answering a door. I started talking to it, not because I expected anything, because it seemed rude not to. "Morning," I'd say. "Filters again today. You burned through another monitor array." And the nearest limb, the one it always brought to the surface first, the one with the sensory fronds at the tip, would rest along the rail while I worked, not touching me, just there, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating off the armored skin. The fronds would move sometimes, slowly, like they were reading the air. Voss noticed eventually. He stood at the observation window for 2 full hours one morning, watching the Veth-kaal track my movements along the rail, and then he called a team meeting and spent 40 minutes explaining why it wasn't what it looked like. Conditioning response. Associative stimulus. The beast had learned that my presence preceded filter changes, which altered the water chemistry which it found preferable. Nothing more. He wrote it up that way in the station log, and everyone accepted it, because the alternative, that Unit 7 had opinions about people, was professionally inconvenient. I didn't argue, I just went back to work. Commander Osip Thrain arrived on a Thursday with an inspection crew of 6, and a set of mandates from the Regional Oversight Bureau about research efficiency metrics. He was a tall man, Thrain, Kalan species, blue-gray skin, the kind of posture that came from spending decades being agreed with. He walked through Bay 7's observation deck with the inspection manifest in one hand and his aide's summary in the other, and didn't look at the tank at all. He looked at the maintenance logs. "These calibration cycles are excessive," he said. He had a flat voice, the kind that didn't expect to be corrected. "The cost per unit of bioluminescence monitoring is 3 times standard. The Bureau considers this inefficient." Voss explained about the burn rate. Thrain marked something on his manifest. I was at the far end of the rail replacing a sensor housing. The Veth-kaal was at the surface, the way it always was when I was working ambient nodes at a low amber, the nearest limb resting against the rail 4 meters from where I stood. I hadn't introduced myself to Thrain. He hadn't looked in my direction. He looked now. "Who is this?" he said to Voss. "Maintenance technician, contract staff, Morrow." Thrain walked toward me. His inspection team followed at the correct distance. He looked at the Veth-kaal, then at me, then at the limb on the rail, with the flat expression of a man recalibrating a problem he thought he'd already solved. "This is the conditioning stimulus Voss noted in the log." "I just do the filters," I said. "The Bureau's position," Thrain said, "is that civilian maintenance staff should not have unsupervised access to a Class 7 specimen containment bay. The liability exposure is significant." He made another mark on his manifest. "You'll be reassigned to general station maintenance. Dr. Voss will manage the calibration cycles." I started to say something. I'm not sure what, something practical, something about the burn rate and the calibrator housing specifications, something that wasn't a protest so much as an explanation. Thrain turned away before I finished the first sentence. His aide was already typing. The Veth-kaal's nodes went dark. Not dim, not the slow cool-down I sometimes saw when I left for the day. All at once, every bioluminescent point extinguishing simultaneously, the way a city goes black in a power failure. 200 meters of predator, suddenly invisible in the water column. The amber surface light gone. Bay 7 in near total darkness except for the observation deck strips along the ceiling. I heard Voss inhale. Thrain turned back. He looked at the water, which was now opaque and lightless and very still, and he looked at me, and something in his posture shifted, the first uncertainty I'd seen in him, quickly replaced by something harder. He stepped forward and put his hand on my shoulder and moved me aside. Not violently, the way you move a piece of furniture. "Step back," he said, to demonstrate perhaps that the animal's behavior had nothing to do with me. To establish. In front of his inspection team, that civilian maintenance staff did not have meaningful relationships with Class 7 containment specimens. The tank wall cracked. Not shattered, not imploded. A single crack running from the water line to the base of the observation rail, 3 centimeters wide, the groan of it reverberating through the deck plating and up through my boots and into my back teeth. Pressurized water beaded along the fracture line. The structural alarm had a 1-second delay before it registered what had happened. In that second, the bay was perfectly silent. Then the alarm, and Thrain's inspection team moving fast toward the access hatch, and Voss shouting something about emergency containment protocols, and under all of it, the sound of something very large beginning to move. I stayed where I was. "Easy now," I said. I said it the way I'd say it to a stuck calibrator housing or a jammed intake valve. Flat, practical, not a command and not a plea, just a voice in the dark that the Veth-kaal had been hearing for 3 years while it watched me work. The movement stopped. The surface of the water was 3 meters below the rail. I couldn't see anything in the dark. I could feel it, though, the displacement, the cold, the sense of mass very close to the surface, holding still. The crack in the wall was still there. The water was still beating through it. The alarm was still going. None of that changed. What changed was the ambient light. 1 node somewhere deep, then 2. Then a slow cascade of amber bioluminescence rising from the water column, not the cold blue of dormancy, and not the full-spectrum warning display I'd seen in the emergency footage from the trench extraction. Something warmer, something patient, the color of a lamp left on in a room you're planning to come back to. The Veth-kaal rose with it. All of it. In 11 years, the research staff of Station Harrath had never seen the Veth-kaal fully surface. The specimen documentation described it as unlikely. The energy expenditure of full emergence from a pressurized column was considered prohibitive. The behavior recorded only twice in trench observation footage, and never in captivity. The xenobiology team had published a paper on it. Voss had 14 pages of analysis explaining why it wouldn't happen here. 6 limbs broke the surface simultaneously, the armored hide streaming water, the sensory fronds spread wide. The head, if you could call it that, the anterior section with its 3 rows of pressure receptors and the feeding array at rest, closed, cleared the waterline and kept rising, and rising, until the Veth-kaal was looking down at the observation deck from a height of perhaps 8 meters, water sheeting off every surface, every bioluminescent node running warm amber from end to end. From the access hatch, I heard someone make a sound I didn't have a word for. Thrain was still on the deck, I'll give him that. He hadn't run. He was standing against the far wall with his inspection manifest still in his hand, and he was looking up at the thing above him, and his posture had finally done something other than project authority. His aide was not on the deck. His inspection team was not on the deck. The Veth-kaal's sensory fronds were moving, slowly, the way they always moved when it was reading the air near the rail, oriented not toward Thrain, though Thrain was the largest thing on the deck other than the equipment racks, oriented toward me. I set down my toolkit. I walked to the rail. The anterior section lowered, not fast, that same deliberate vertical drift I'd watched 100 times from the observation window, the same motion it made when I came through the access hatch in the morning, coming down to where I was. The nearest limb, the one with the sensory fronds at the tip, extended across the rail and rested on my shoulder. It weighed about as much as a man. Cold, through my jacket. The fronds moved against the side of my neck like they were reading something. Behind me I heard Thrain exhale. "Commander," I said without turning around, "you want to have someone look at the crack in the containment wall. It's a structural issue." I reached up and put my hand on the limb on my shoulder, the way I'd done 100 times at the rail when the Veth-kaal rested there while I worked. The armored surface was cold and dense and very real under my palm. I'd recommend leaving the bay now. Slowly. Thrain left. His inspection team filed out behind him over the next few minutes. Voss stayed at the observation window until the Veth-kaal began to lower back toward the water, which took a while, because it didn't seem inclined to move while my hand was on its limb, and then Voss left too, walking fast, not looking back. The bay went quiet. The structural alarm had been silenced from the emergency panel. The crack in the wall had been flagged for repair crew, though no repair crew had yet appeared, because no repair crew had been assigned to Bay 7 containment work in 11 years, and no one on station was certain of the protocol. The amber bioluminescence was still running, warm and steady, casting long shadows across the observation deck. The Veth-kaal surfaced again just enough to rest a limb across the rail, lower this time, easier. The fronds moved along the surface of the metal, slow and patient, the way they did in the mornings when I was working. I picked up my toolkit. I went back to the calibrator housing I'd been replacing when Thrain arrived. "You burned through another monitor array," I said. "You know that, I'm just telling you." The fronds stilled, then slowly they started moving again. I finished the calibrator housing. I checked the salinity readings. I made my notes in the maintenance log: anomalous full emergence event, containment wall crack flagged, amber bioluminescent display sustained, behavioral trigger unclear, and I did not write what I actually thought the behavioral trigger was, because no one who read the log would have accepted it, and it didn't need to be in writing anyway. Commander Thrain was removed from Station Command oversight that same evening. The Regional Oversight Bureau's official communication cited a procedural irregularity in the inspection visit and requested a review of the efficiency mandate recommendations. I heard about it from the duty officer when I came in for my night check shift. The Veth-kaal was at the surface when I came through the hatch. It was always at the surface when I came through the hatch. I set my kit down and poured my coffee and looked up at the amber light moving slow and warm through all that pressurized water, and at the limb already resting along the rail, patient, waiting, And I thought about what Voss had written in the station log: conditioning response, associative stimulus, nothing more. And I thought about the crack in the containment wall, 3 centimeters wide, opened in the time it takes a man to move a maintenance technician aside like a piece of furniture. "Morning," I said. The fronds moved. I got to work.